Hello YouTube, this is Miram Patel, and this is a follow-up video to the tutorial and review that I made a couple days ago on the Captain Sim 757-200 base pack for P3D version 4 and 4.1. So many users or viewers have requested that I make a shutdown tutorial on how to put the aircraft from the default loaded state that Captain Sim provides when you first start the airplane to a panel state where it's kind of like a turnaround panel state or a cold and dark scenario. So if you're a PMDG user, then you're probably familiar with the cold and dark, long panel state, short panel state, as well as the ready for engine start states that are located in the FMC. Captain Sim does not have these states, and so we're going to have to do them manually. And if you want to follow the video tutorial that I made from the previous video, which I highly do suggest you check out, that video starts the aircraft in a cold and dark scenario. And so today I want to kind of talk about how to put the aircraft in that state. And when we get to the shutdown checklist, as we're going through it, I'll also stop and show you guys the turnaround state of the aircraft. So in front of me here, all I have is the Captain Sim 757 loaded just pretty much straight from the sim. All I did is I slewed the aircraft to this taxiway because we're going to be parking here at gate 77 at LAX. And we're going to go ahead and just taxi the aircraft in, push some of the switches to pretend that we already just came from a flight, we landed, we cleaned up the airplane, and then we'll commence with the shutdown. So let's go ahead and head into the flight deck. And before I get started, you'll notice that I have a couple warnings here: parking brake, TCAS, and window heat. You should have the same if you just load the aircraft. So we're going to come down here, go to the TCAS and leave it in the TA only mode, which is what you would what mode setting you would have it in if you just landed and now you're on the ground. The next thing I want to do is just go ahead and turn on the window heat because you need those in flight. That's pretty much it. We'll go ahead and release the parking brake, advance the power levers a little bit, and we'll taxi the aircraft to this gate. And then from there, we'll commence with the shutdown checklist. So, once again, if you haven't checked out the review that I had in the previous video, I highly suggest you do, because it is a pretty comprehensive video. I tried to be as neutral as I could be in terms of the review side of it, and it is a pretty informative tutorial, I believe. So, both this video and the previous one, and really any 757 content you see on the channel from now on, is going to be by the book, meaning I do have access to a United Airlines quick reference handbook as well as a flight crew operations manual, or the FCOM, and so pretty much all the procedures that I do are going to be as realistic as I can get them to be. So actually, for this shutdown checklist, or this shutdown video, I have in front of me two documents from the quick reference handbook, and one's going to be shutting down the aircraft into just the turnaround state, and the other will be to shut down the aircraft to a cold and dark state. So anyway, we've pretty much just parked now. I don't know how far I went on the taxi. Well, I guess we have quite a bit of distance, so I'll go ahead and add a little bit of power and taxi up to the 757-767 line there. There it is, and set parking brakes. So we can go ahead and get the jetway going, and it's head down. We're going to shut this aircraft off. So the first item on the checklist is to set the parking brake, which we did, and we confirmed that we have normal pressure. So because we don't have any brake source lights, we're going to assume we have normal pressure. The next thing we want to do is make sure that the APU of the aircraft is on. That's something they usually do as soon as the aircraft touches down, and really as soon as you're off the runway, it's part of the cleanup checklist to just switch on the APU. But we're going to go ahead and do that, get the APU running, and we can monitor the start by going to the status page here and just checking the EGT. It's going to rise to around 640 Celsius. That's when you know the APU is running, and you'll also get a run light up here next to the APU. One thing we could do is go and turn off the strobe light or the white anti-collision light, because that's not required at the gate. Okay, so we have the APU is now running, so it's okay to turn off the engines. If we don't turn on the APU, then we shut off the engines, we'll lose complete power to the aircraft. We'll revert to standby electric power. So let's go ahead and turn off the engines by going to the fuel cutoff valves, which are located right here, left and right, and we'll turn them off. And we have to note the fuel flow. So we'll go here, go back to the engine, and we'll ensure that fuel flow goes down to 0.0. And soon enough we'll get 0.0 here, and that ensures that the engine fuel flow is officially cut off. There we go. The next thing we want to do is ensure that the auto throttle of the aircraft is switched off. So that's just going to the AT arm switch and making sure that it's off. By default, the Captain Sim panel state has it off, as well as the flight directors. The next thing is to go to the hydraulic pumps of the aircraft, which are located right there. And we want to turn off all the pumps in the aircraft except for the left and the right engine pumps. So we'll start with the center electric pumps, and then we'll go to the outside electric pumps, or the left and right electric pumps. Alright, after that, it's the anti-ice system of the aircraft. Just ensure wing, left engine, right engine, anti-ice switches are off. The next thing is to go and turn off the fuel pumps of the aircraft. So we're going to come up here. We have 6 pumps that power or send fuel to the aircraft engines. And we're just going to turn them off like so. The next thing is we want to turn the engine start selectors to the off position. So these are the engine start selectors. We'll go ahead and turn them off like so. After that, emergency exit lights, which are located just in the aft of the overhead panel up here. You just want to open up the guard, right click on it to turn it to the off position. We should get this unarmed showing. After that, we can worry about the cargo heat, but this is a 757, not a 767. The QRH that I have is for the 757 and the 767, so there's some things that I might accidentally say which are for the 767 only, like the cargo heat, but we're just going to go ahead and skip that. The next thing we can worry about is the window heat. Just come up here, we have the window heat, and we can just turn them off. Then we can do the equipment cooling, but we're not going to worry about that. It's a 767 item. Then we can do the radar and TCAS check. So radar is our weather radar. So we come down here to the EFIS and ensure that the WXR switches are turned off. And we can come here to the TCAS of the aircraft and just set it to the standby mode. The next item on the checklist is to go to the IRS, which is located on the upper left of the overhead panel, and simply turning them off. There we go. So now the aircraft has lost its IRS alignment, which is completely okay. And this state that I have the aircraft in right now is the state that you would leave the aircraft if you're going to do a turnaround on the airplane. So if the airplane's going back up in the air in under 2 hours, then the pilots will simply leave the aircraft in this state and it should be fine. One other thing to note is we can set the external power to the aircraft and turn off the APU, and that will turn it into the panel state long mode that you're used to on the PMDG aircraft. So let's go ahead and do that. Shift F2. And we'll click external power, close that. Come up here, turn on external power, and simply turn off the APU. So now the aircraft is in a long panel state, meaning that the aircraft will probably sit there for a couple hours before we send her back up in the air, and that way we're just not burning any fuel with the APU running. You'll also note that we'll get the pressure light for the left forward pump to come back because now it's not pumping any fuel to the APU. Another thing we can do, because we're on the ground, is set the wheel chocks. And the reason for that is because the aircraft has lost hydraulic pressure, meaning we're not going to have any brake hydraulic pressure in the wheels, and so the airplane is pretty much just going to roll around if we don't have those chocks in place. Anyway, that concludes the turnaround states of the aircraft. Now we're going to go ahead and continue with the cold and dark shutdown checklist. So this is under the supplementary normal procedures, where they kind of go more in depth on how to, or what to do for the airplane. So to do this, we are going to go ahead and start with the APU off parking checklist in the normal procedures. So we would ensure that the fuel control switches are in the cutoff valve or position, which they are. The hydraulic pumps are managed, which they are. The fuel pumps are going to be all off, which we did, and we can verify that we have external power to the aircraft, which we do, and we can verify it. The external power is on, which is good. Flipping over the page, we can continue here. Engine start selectors are off, which we did. Emergency light switches are off, which we did. Left and right flight director switches are off. Then we can worry about mic selectors as well as voice controls and cockpit speakers, but these are all functions that are not modeled in the airplane, so I'll just go ahead and omit those. ECAS status display, we can come over here and just verify that we know of these errors or cautions. So we have the fuel pressure, the hydraulic pressure, engine shutdown, TCAS, window heat, and emergency lights are off. And we did those purposely, so that's okay. The next thing is we can ensure that the thrust reverser system is checked. That's a 767-300 specific item, so I'm just going to leave that alone. If we are on an ER or ETOPS aircraft, we'll worry about the HF radios of the airplane and just make sure that they're in the off position. I don't think the Captain Sim aircraft has that, so we're just going to assume that the comm panel here is managed already. I don't think this is, yeah, that's not really a switch. We can just turn off the mic modes, and there we go. The next thing is going to be looking at the pneumatics panel and the APU bleed. So I'll come up here, look at the pneumatics panel, just verify that it's all good, which it really is. We have pack flow, but we'll worry about that in a future part of the checklist. APU bleed switch is on, so we'll just go ahead and do that. Isolation switch is on. Left and right ISLN switches are open, 767 only, so we're going to omit that. The flight directors are off, confirm that again. ACARS data is entered, we don't have that modeled. RAU selectors are off. The first officer external earplugs in the 2 o'clock position, we can go ahead and do that, but it's just trivial. Flip cards are closed. The indication display and instrument lights are dimmed, meaning that all the primary flight display, navigation display, ICAS, and lower ICAS are all in the dim position. I'm just going to leave them the way they are. And now we can worry about the air conditioning panel of the aircraft. So we'll come up here. Pack selectors, we can, if it's warm weather, we can leave them on, but we're just going to shut down the aircraft, so we'll go ahead and shut them off. There we go. Gasper switch 767, so we're going to omit that. And then we'll go ahead and turn off the retric fans of the aircraft. So it's only the right retric fan. It's common that we'll turn off both retric fans, but for the 757 only, the left retric fan actually cools down the flight computers as well as all the equipment for the aircraft. And so if we still have to cool it down, then we'll leave that left retric fan in the on position. APU bleed switch is going to go off, so we'll go ahead and do that. Then the next one is going to be the standby power selector, and now these last three items are going to be critical because they're actually going to shut down the aircraft. So we'll go standby power is off. The next thing is going to be the circuit breakers that will pull but not model. And the last thing is going to be turning off the external power of the aircraft and then turning off the battery. So we'll go external off, and as you can see, the battery is discharging now and we have no standby power. Pretty much everything is turned off. Battery off. One other thing you can do is just turn those off as well. But now, and the beacon light, sorry about that. Now that's the state of the aircraft in a complete cold and dark scenario. One correction I just noticed is that whenever the APU is running, the red anti-collision light should be on, but when it's not running, you just turn it off. Anyway, that's pretty much how you shut down the Captain Sim 757-200 for P3D version 4 and 4.1. This video might be a little bit long just for a shutdown video, but I hope it was helpful. I hope it was informative. And this is pretty much done by procedure through the actual QRH of the aircraft. So once again, I hope it was helpful. I'll try to get a full flight tutorial where we talk about different modes of the autopilot as well as diversions and then ILS or RNAV approach in a future video. Hopefully I'll get to that this or next weekend. But for the meantime, I hope this video as well as the one I made a couple of days ago are helpful for everyone to just have an introduction to the 757, have some questions answered for the airplane, and just some procedure that you guys can follow to ensure you have a realistic flight with the airplane. Anyway, I hope that was helpful, and take care.